Hey there, this is Pastor Jeff. I'm in my office on Sunday the 23rd. I am going to be recording the worship sermon / confirmation teaching from Wednesday night, October 19th, 2022. Here we go. So this evening, we're continuing our series called The Whole Point. I've got a question for you. Have you ever done something that turned out not to be a great idea? I'm talking about one of those decisions that seemed like a good idea when you thought of it, but after you actually did it, that's when you realize it wasn't as great an idea as you thought. We've all been there, right? I know I have, at least. For me, it was the summer of 2013, and I was in Belize, and the group was going to go snorkeling. I could not wait to explore the sea, the reefs. However, I underestimated how far the swim was and how out of shape I was, and though the views were amazing, there were multiple times that I was not sure that I was going to make it back to the boat. And that beautiful view that I was experiencing may have been my last view. So maybe you're thinking, that's crazy. How could you have not realized that was a bad idea? Honestly, you're probably right. If I'd taken time to think about the choice I probably would have realized it wasn't the best choice to make. So here's the thing. We all struggle with making wise choices. Every single day, we're faced with all kinds of decisions. And in most cases, we have two options. We can either make the wise choice, the one that we know is best for us, or we could make the unwise choice, the one we know probably isn't the best. Maybe you've stayed up all night, binging Netflix, even though you knew you had a basketball game the next morning. Maybe you posted a photo online that you hoped that your mom wouldn't find. Maybe you've exaggerated the truth to your boss. Whatever the choice, chances are you probably decided to do it without really thinking through the consequences first. Even if you knew it wasn't wise, you chose to do it anyway. Why? Because making wise choices just isn't always easy. Every single day, you have to make multiple decisions. At times, these decisions have a serious impact on our lives. Sometimes we make the wise choice. We do the thing that we know is right or best for us in the moment. But other times, we don't. We do the thing that we know may not lead us to the best place. And when that happens, here's what I have found to be true. We don't always think about the consequences. For our confirmation students, talking back to your parents or breaking their rules will eventually lead to a punishment. And most likely, it will cause them to lose trust in you. Breezing through your homework without really understanding might help you get the assignment done, but it won't help you pass the class at the end of the semester. Making fun of someone else might seem like the popular thing to do at the time, but in the long run, it's extremely hurtful to both you and the person that you are making fun of. The reality, whether you are a student, a parent, or are retired, is that every choice has a consequence. And sooner or later, the consequences of the unwise choices will catch up to you. Whether you realize it or not, the choices that you make today can have a major impact on your life tomorrow. So what are we supposed to do? If making wise choices isn't always easy, then how can we start? Luckily, we aren't the first people who have had this question before. In fact, a guy named Paul wrote about this very thing. Paul wrote about it in a letter to a group of people who lived in Galatia. Here we can find that letter in the Bible in a book called Galatians. Before I tell you about what Paul said in the letter, let me remind you of a few things. Paul became a Christian a few years after Jesus was crucified and rose from the dead. For Paul, knowing Jesus changed everything. We talked about that last week. So when he started following Jesus, Paul was all in. He eventually started several churches, including a few in Galatia. Paul really cared about the people in Galatia and wanted to make sure that they weren't missing the whole point of this faith thing. That's why he wrote the letter that we are going to look at today. Paul talked to the people specifically about wise choices. Here's what he said: "You will always harvest what you plant." Now, Paul wasn't talking about actual planting here. He was using an illustration to teach the Galatians about the choices that they were making. When it comes to gardening, you can only harvest or produce what you actually plant. For example, if you plant an apple tree, that's going to grow in your garden. We are in Door County, so if you plant a cherry tree, you're going to eventually harvest cherries. It wouldn't make sense for someone to plant one thing and then expect something different to grow from the ground. You have to plant the seeds now that you want to see grow later. Now, while we may not be expert gardeners, we're all planting seeds in our lives every single day with our choices. Every decision we make today is going to grow or harvest something in our lives later. When we make wise choices, we're planting seeds that have the potential to grow into something great in our lives. But when we make unwise choices, we're planting seeds that have the potential to grow into things that aren't so great. That's why making wise choices now is so important for our lives, not just today, but for tomorrow and beyond. Why is this so important? Well, look at what Paul has to say next. Those who live only to satisfy their own sinful nature will harvest decay and death from that sinful nature. But those who live to please the Spirit will harvest everlasting life from the Spirit. Harsh, right? That's how serious Paul was about making sure that the Galatians understood the consequences of their choices. That's why the next part is so important, because Paul also pointed out that when we do good and make wise choices now, we'll harvest amazing things in our lives later. Now, let me just stop here and say that I realize simply knowing this is true doesn't make it easier to make wise choices. It doesn't make it easier to care about the future more than we care about what's happening right now. Then sometimes the harvest is going to be hard to see. However, I promise eventually the harvest of all of our wise choices one day. Here's what I want you to know. You have the freedom to make wise choices. You have the freedom to choose what's best for you. You have the freedom to stop and think about a decision before you make it. This freedom is one of the most important, because what we do today has an impact on how we live tomorrow. And that means the decisions that we make now are important. To help us remember this, Paul offered some more encouragement. So let's not get tired of doing what is good. At just the right time, we will reap a harvest of blessing if we don't give up. Therefore, whenever we have the opportunity, we should do good to everyone, especially to those in the family of faith. Paul was basically saying, keep going. Don't give up, because the good stuff is coming. We may not know exactly how it will show up or even when it will show up, but we can trust that when we're planning the right things, God will eventually reward us with a harvest. Maybe you are planting seeds in your life right now by making wise choices, but you feel like you haven't seen anything good come from it yet. I think there may be some who believe that about the Bayview, but I believe that many seeds are being planted and a great harvest will occur. Maybe for you as an individual, you're going, I'm making wise choices, but I'm not seeing any fruit. I want to encourage you to not give up. Just like Paul said, if you keep doing good and making wise choices now, your harvest is coming. And I promise you, even if you can't see it now, it's going to be worth it. So, what does this mean for us today? How can we make wise choices that will lead to good things in the future? First, ask yourself this question: what kind of seeds am I planting in my life right now? Next, ask yourself about the kind of seeds you want to be planting instead. Lastly, ask God for the wisdom, strength, and encouragement to make those wise choices. God, living inside of us, help us figure out what's wise or unwise. So ask for God's help. This isn't always going to be easy. I want to encourage you to find someone to talk about the seeds that you are planting. Find the encouragement you need to figure out how to make wise choices that will help you in the future, even when it feels hard. As we depart, wrestle with this question: what's one wise choice that you need encouragement to make right now? God's peace and blessings upon you.